All right. Good morning, everyone. So we'll be starting today's session. So today's session will be on gateways. Post completing this session, if you have time, then we are going to start our personal loan application, which I am going to continue doing the development. But right now, you don't have to develop anything on the personal loan application at your end. Okay, I repeat, whatever I am doing, I am developing the personal loan application. You guys don't have to develop that at your end at the moment. Okay, so what you guys need to do, I am going to share a use case tonight. Okay, with uh with Kirtana. So maybe she would get that, maybe tomorrow morning she would be receiving that. Tomorrow when we connect, I am going to discuss on the use case. So the use case, you have to develop, you have to develop the entire process and all the human services from scratch. There would be no help, there would be no video which you can refer, so you have to do it. So tomorrow is Thursday, right? So you get this entire weekend to complete the use case. When we come on Monday, we'll divide team into groups. Okay, this entire team, so I believe we have around 23-24 people. So we'll be dividing this into like 3 to 4 groups, and each group would be giving the demo. Okay, so Friday we'll be dividing the this team into groups, and Monday will be giving the demo. Okay, so tomorrow morning we are going to discuss on the use case. So by tomorrow morning, I hope you would have the use case with you also. Okay, all right. Okay, so gateway is a very important component, very important. I mean, whenever you guys will be working in the process layer, okay, whenever you're going to design the process, so when designing a process, gateway is a very common component that we use, especially when we have the different levels of approval. Okay, like if you have seen in leave application, we have only one level of approval, that is the manager. Similarly, when we went to the personal loan application, we saw that there are around, say, 3 levels of approval or 2 levels of approval were there, right? Verification agency, then we had the residence and office verification agency, and then finally we had the underwriter. So we had almost like 3 levels of approval. Similarly, in the other processes, wherever you're going to work in a real-time project in IBM BPM, you will see that there will definitely be more than at least 2 levels of approval. Okay, so generally in case wherever there are more levels of approval, we go and use this gateway. Okay, some or the other way you will think that, okay, so I need to use the gateway, so you have to implement the gateway. So we need to understand the different types of gateway that can be implemented in a process. Okay, and I believe we are aware of what is a gateway, because we have implemented, or we had implemented a very small uh, feature in one of the human services, that is validation. And in that validation, we had implemented the gateway which was controlling the routing of the path based on some validation, right? So if the validation was successful, then I would have gone ahead and completed the human service. If the validation was not successful, then I was routing back to the coach, right? So gateway, I can say that it controls the routing. Okay, it controls the routing of the output path based on some condition. Okay, it is based on some condition. That is gateway. Now in IBM BPM, guys, that there are 4 types of gateway: exclusive gateway, inclusive gateway, parallel gateways, and event gateway. Exclusive gateway, it is available in both the process layer as well as in the service layer. Okay, and in case of inclusive gateway, parallel gateway, and event gateway, these 3 gateways are available only in the process layer. Okay, so exclusive gateway we can implement both in the process layer as well as in the service layer, whereas these three types of gateway, inclusive, parallel, and event, it is available only in the process layer. Okay, so for each type of gateway, guys, we are going to see the implementation today. I'm going to create process for each type of gateway, and I'm going to explain the functionality of each gateway. Coming to the last one, event gateway, this will be covered during the event session. So we have our event session very soon, starting from next week. All right, coming to next week, I believe I have already said to Kirtana, I don't know whether she's aware from the Mind Magics team or not. So I am not available on 14th and 15th next week. Okay, so 14th and 15th, I'll not be available. So 15th is Dasera and 14th, I'm going on leave. So those 2 days I'll not be available. So we'll plan to start the event session on Monday. Okay, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 3 days of event session will be there. So that time we will be covering this event gateway. Okay, so let's start. Let's start implementing one by one. So I'll go back to my designer. It's taking some time. Okay, so now I'm going to create process for each of these gateways. Okay, so first I'm going to create a process for implementing exclusive gateway. I'll give a name, exclusive gateway. Okay, so first I will complete the design and then I'll explain what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to add some dummy activities over here, some user activities I'm going to add. And for those user activities, I'm going to add some dummy human services because we are seeing the routing on the process layer. So whatever is there in the human service doesn't matter at the moment. Okay, so I'm just showing you the routing, how this exclusive gateway will work in the process layer. In the human service layer, we have already seen yesterday. Okay, so how this exclusive gateway works in the process layer, we'll see today. But let me complete the design and then I'll start explaining. Okay. So this is more or less the design of this process. Very simple. I just did the design of the process and not of any human services, right? I did not create any human service. I just created this process. I did the design. I added few user activities and I added an exclusive gateway. From where did I add the exclusive gateway? So here on the right hand side palette, you see the third option says gateway. If I click on this, I see a drop down, and this drop down is nothing but the different types of gateway. Okay, so if I hover my mouse on top of any gateway, it tells me the name of the gateway and also the definition of the gateway. Okay, so the first one is exclusive, the second one is inclusive gateway, the third one is parallel gateway, and the fourth one is event gateway. So I drag this over here. Anyways, if you drag a gateway, by default, it is always an exclusive gateway. Okay, but still you can click on this drop down and you can drag any of this in the process layer. Okay, so we are good with how to drag a gateway. We know which component to drag. No doubts on that. So moving forward, I added two parameters over here, two variables, two private variables. One is match found, which is a Boolean variable, and the other is data input, which is a string. Now match found and data input, why did I create these variables? Because any gateway you implement, the routing from the gateway will be based on some condition. And if I have to implement a condition, then I have to have some variables, right? So based on these variables, I am going to implement some condition or some decision where on the exclusive gateway. And based on the condition, say for example, match found, you see, I have added the default value as true, right? Similarly, data input also, it's a string variable. I have added a default value as success. So what I'll implement, say, going to the definition, here I have to implement some condition. Say I implement, if match found is true, it will go to activity 2. If match found is false, it will go to activity 3. If data input is success, it will go to activity 4. Like this, I am going to implement the conditions. Okay, that is the reason I added these variables. So whenever you implement an exclusive gateway in a real-time process where you will have the human services and everything, so over there also, if you have to add some condition, if you have to add some condition on the gateway, then that will be based on some variables. Yesterday also we saw something very similar in the human service. We added the gateway, and over there we added a condition called validation success, right? It was also a variable, and we implemented the condition based on that variable, right? Based on the value of that variable. Similarly, over here also we are doing the same thing. Okay, till now any questions? I'll slow down a bit. This session is important because the demo that you will be giving, the use case that you will be implementing, you have to implement gateway over there. Okay, so be very attentive. If you have any doubts, please stop me there and ask me questions. If I'm going too fast, stop me there and tell me that Rahul, please slow down. Don't tell it at the end of the session, guys, like you said yesterday. Okay, so if I'm going fast, you have to stop me at that moment and slow me down. All right, so now I have completed the design. You can see from the gateway I added the different sequence flows and I've connected them to each of these activities. Okay, so before I show you this gateway, how to implement it, I'll just show you one more thing which I was talking about, some dummy human services. So you see, when I click on this activity 1, if I go to this implementation property, You see this default UI human services there is attached. So this gets attached by default. Even you can see the same in your BAW trial version, whichever you're using right now. If you're designing a process and if you drag a user activity or a user task in any lane, you will see by default uh, this particular dummy human service gets attached. Okay, it happens in the BAW also. So these are all the dummy human services that are provided to us by IBM BPM. Okay, so in case if I don't want to implement a human service, if I just want to create some kind of POC or some kind of say for practice purpose, if I want to create some process, I can use this dummy activities. How these dummy activities will work? This dummy human services, they also have a coach, and that coach also has some button. And what we know, whenever you click on a button, what happens? It is a boundary event. It tries to come out of the coach. And if we have the next component as the end event, then it completes the human service, right? And as a result, the activity also gets completed. So similarly over here also, we will be doing the same. So I am using this dummy human service just to complete this activity because I have no intention to show anything on this activity. My intention is to show this process, how this process will work with the help of this exclusive gateway. Okay, so now what we will do, we are going to implement the conditions in this exclusive gateway. Okay, so for that you have to select the exclusive gateway. Like I always said, if you have to go to the properties of any component in IBM BPM, you have to click on that and then you scroll down. You see these are the different properties of this gateway. It says exclusive gateway over here. And at any moment of time in the diagram, if I have to change the type of gateway, you see on the behavior property here, we have the gateway type. Again, there is a drop down over here. I can see these three types of gateways are available. I can implement any of them. Event gateway is not available over here. The reason being event is not implemented. If I had implemented some kind of event over here, then the event gateway would have appeared. Okay, so here we have only three types of gateway: exclusive, parallel, and inclusive. Now, if I have to change this into any other, I can just select that and automatically this exclusive gateway will be changed into the other forms of gateway. Now, in case I have to implement some condition on the gateway, if I have to implement some kind of decision on the gateway, I have to go to the implementation. Here I have the different decisions. Similar to this, we saw something yesterday. We had to add some conditions over here. Okay, so you see for each of this condition, it's saying to activity 4, the second condition is for activity 3, and then we have a default flow which is considered to be as the happy path, right? Yesterday we discussed. So default flow, if you see, this is my default flow, and there is a mark over here. Somebody asked me yesterday why this mark was coming. So this is because that this is the default flow. So activity 2 is the default flow here, and we have activity 4 and activity 3. And then we have blank, which means that for this activities, if I have to route it from the exclusive gateway, I have to add some condition over here, right? So I'm going to add some condition. Similarly, whatever we did yesterday, it's very exactly the same way we have to add a condition. So I'll add a condition like tw.local dot match found, and then we have here the different operators. We can use these operators. So match found is a Boolean variable, right? So here it can support only these two operators, equal to and not equal to, right? So I'm going to use equal to true. Okay, so if match found is true, then it will go to activity 4. Now I'll add a condition for activity 3, tw.local.match found equal to false. Okay, So now if I see my condition, all the conditions for activity 4, I can see if match found is true, then only it will route to activity 4. If match found is false, then it will route to activity 3. And if match found is neither true or nor false, okay, if it matches some other condition, then it will go to activity 2, which is my default path or the happy path, right? Simple. So if I run this process, can someone say me from the exclusive gateway, where should I go?
Rahul,
Yes.
Boolean variable can be only true or false, right? So activity 2 will never
Activity
be.
2 will never be triggered. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It will never be triggered. Ideally, if you see the variables which I have considered here, match found and data input. So match found I have considered as true.
Yeah.
So if I have considered this as true, that was my question. So where should I go from this gateway?
To activity 4.
Correct, to activity 4. So from this gateway, I should move to activity 4. Okay, so let's see. I'll run this process now. So I can see that an instance has been created over here. 253 is the instance ID, and right now it is active. If I come down, I can see we have something called tasks, and we can see activity 1 has been triggered. What is this 253? Can someone say me what is this 253 in brackets?
ID.
Instance ID.
What ID is this?
Instance ID. Instance ID.
This is actually not the, this is actually not the instance ID. This is actually the task ID. Somehow instance ID and task ID is same for this. That's the reason. Okay, so it is similar, but ideally this is the task ID of a task. I said you, like, whenever we trigger a process, the instance is getting created for the process, and whatever tasks we have, whether it's a human task, I mean a user task or a system task or any kind of activity that we add. Okay, so everything has got a task ID. Whenever that task will be triggered, a task ID will be generated. Similarly for this also, whenever you come to tasks in the inspector, if you see a task has been created, next to it you have a task ID. Okay, so now I'm going to claim this. This is a dummy coach. It has got some dummy coach views and a button. You see, this is a kind of sample coach which doesn't have anything basically. So I can click on this button, done, and move forward, because I want to see how this gateway will work, how it will behave. And now I can see, guys, if you see on the right hand side in the tasks, you see activity 4 has been triggered. Next to it, I have 254, which is again the task ID for activity 4. So you see this diagram now, the token has now moved to activity 4. Initially, it was on activity 1. When I completed activity 1, the token came to this gateway. In this gateway, we had added some condition. So which condition became true? The first condition, that is to activity 4, it became true, and then it moved ahead to activity 4. Okay, are we good? Any questions, any doubts?
Yes.
No, Rahul.
Okay, good. So now exclusive gateway implementation is still not over. We have learned only one thing about exclusive gateway till now. That is two things basically. One is exclusive gateway can be implemented both in the process layer as well as in the service layer. And based on some condition on the exclusive gateway, I can come out of this gateway as an output path, and it can trigger the next activity, whichever condition is getting satisfied. So if I'm adding multiple conditions on the gateway, whenever some condition is true, then that output path is being taken and the next component is getting triggered. That is what we have learned till now about this exclusive gateway. Now there is one more thing, guys. Okay, now what happens if multiple conditions are getting true? for this gateway, right? So we have these three different activities, and I can see in the first activity, is to activity 4, the match found has become true. Now what happens in case for the third activity also, if I make this as true, what should happen? Both the activity 3 and activity 4 will be triggered, right? Because both the conditions are getting true. Ideally that should happen. I mean, if I'm very new to this IBM BPM, if someone teaches me, then I will definitely say that yes, it should go to both these activities, right? So let's see. I'll save this change and I'll trigger this process again for creating a new instance. So 254 is the new instance that has been created. And if you see the diagram right now, the token is active on activity 1. It has not reached the exclusive gateway till now. So let me claim activity 1. I will click on done to move forward. So I see that still only activity 4 has been triggered. Although activity 3 match found is true, but still activity 4 only has been triggered. Okay, let's discuss why this happened. Let's come to these conditions. Now here guys, you see these conditions from the top. The first condition says to activity 4, whenever a match found is true, it will go to activity 4. The second condition says if match found is true, it will go to activity 3, and the default flow is to activity 2. Right? Now, if I have to write this condition in a code using if else statement, the condition would have been if match found is equal to true, then go to activity 4. Else if match found is equal to true, then go to activity 3. Else go to activity 2. Now, if you guys are aware of if else statement, if the first statement is true, it will never go to the else. Am I correct?
Yes, Rahul.
Right?
Yes, Rahul.
So you guys all agree to this if
Yes,
else
Rahul.
statement? If
Yes,
my
Rahul.
first
Yes,
condition
Rahul.
is true, it will never go to the else statement. So in this case, if I implement conditions in an exclusive gateway, it takes in the form of if else. If my first condition is true, it will not go to the next decision. That is, if match found is true, go to activity 3. It will not execute this statement because my first statement itself is matching and it is true. Now what I'll do, you guys will
Rahul?
understand. Yes, yes.
Their activity.
Sorry, you are not audible somehow.
Noor, your mic is off.
Is it clear?
Yes, you are audible now. Yes.
In the activity 4, beside the true option is there. No? Two arrows is there. Upward and downward. What
I was coming to that. I was just about to say that. Yeah. So now what I'll do, guys, I'll move this second condition at the top. How I can do it? Using this arrow. Okay. So if I click on this arrow, this condition will move up. Why it is not moving? It moved. So it was getting stuck somehow. Okay. So I clicked on this arrow. So activity 3 condition was here. Now you see it went at the top. And now we have activity 4 condition over here. Okay. So using these arrows, you can just move the conditions. You can change the order of the condition, right? So guys, now if I run this process, activity 3 should be triggered. Whatever I said according to that, right? Then activity 3 should be triggered. So let's see. Let me run this process now. Activity 1 is triggered again for this new instance 255. Activity 1 is active right now. I can see the token. Let me claim this activity 1 and move forward. Now you see guys, activity 3 has been triggered. Why? Because again, it is taking the form of if else. So the first statement is matching, so it will not go to the next statements. Any question? Any questions?
No, Rahul.
No, Rahul.
No, Rahul, be clear.
No, Rahul.
So can we say this? For an exclusive gateway, even if multiple conditions are getting satisfied, it will still take only one output path. Can I say this while
Yes,
defining
Rahul.
the
Yes.
exclusive gateway?
Yes, Rahul.
So now we understood what is an exclusive gateway. I can implement multiple conditions on an exclusive gateway, but an exclusive gateway satisfies only one condition. And if someone asks you in an interview or ever in life that how, whatever the conditions you write in exclusive gateway, in what form I can define it in a code, always tell we can define it in the form of if else statement. So if the first condition is satisfying, it will never move to the next conditions, right? Okay. Okay. So now, if you have learned this exclusive gateway, I just add one more thing over here. Now, guys, here you see, I have added only one condition. Say for activity 3, I have added here only one condition. That is, if match found is equal to true, it will go to activity 3. Similarly, for activity 4 also, I added only one condition. That is, if match found is equal to true, it will go to activity 4. Right? Now, say if I have to add multiple conditions for a single routing. Say, for example, for activity 3, I have only added with one parameter. Now, if I want to add multiple parameters in a single condition, can I do it in IBM BPM for a gateway? Yes, we can do it. So let's see how we can do it. Say here, I have added the condition based on only one parameter. If I have to add multiple parameters in a single condition, let us see how we can do it. So for that, I already had created one parameter, an additional parameter called data input. Okay, so I'm going to also use this in our condition. So I'll go back to the definition. Say for the first activity to activity 3, I'm going to add in this way. JavaScript, why? Expression.
Rahul, I think we need to have gap between end operator and end operator.
There is already a gap.
Okay.
No. Why is this coming? Okay. Okay, this is correct. So basically that those brackets, it was not supporting. I don't know why, but somehow it was not supporting the brackets. So without the bracket, it is supporting. So here it is showing me exclamation mark because it's a complex condition. And what is a complex condition? In a complex condition, I can add multiple parameters, okay, to satisfy that condition. So here, guys, I have added multiple conditions where I am adding if match found is true and data input is success. In that case, it will go to activity 3. Okay. And what I've done on the right hand side, I have made this as none, because you can understand that if I have to use these operators, in that case, only one parameter I can use. So if you guys have to use multiple parameters, you have to add the conditions in this way on the left hand side and make this operator column as none. Okay, we don't have to use this in that case. Exclamation mark will come, nothing to worry. It is because we are adding a complex condition where we are adding multiple conditions together in for a single condition. Okay, whenever you add multiple parameters for a single condition, you will definitely get an exclamation mark. Okay, nothing to worry. So now, even for a single condition also, say if I don't want to use the right hand side thing, you can make this as none, and you can also use it in this way. Okay, this also is supported. It will not throw any error, it will still work. Okay, so I'll save this. If I run this process now, so again this activity 3 will be triggered because my first condition is getting satisfied. It will not go to the second one. Anyway, the second one will not be supported because it is false, and I've made match found as true over here, right? So let us run this process again. Let's see whether this is working. So a new instance is created, 256. Activity 1 is active right now. Let me claim it. I'll complete it. And now I should move forward to activity 3. Because my first activity 3, it has the condition match found is true and data input is success. So this is matching. So activity 3 is getting triggered. Right? Any doubts, guys, on adding multiple conditions together?
No, Rahul.
Okay. So guys, here I am using and operator. So maybe I had such kind of requirement where I had to match both these conditions at one go, but you can use or operator also, like either of this condition. If it is true, then it will go to activity 3. So in that case, you can use this or operator. So I'm not explaining all these things. You guys must be aware of these operators. So and operator is when we want to check both the conditions are true or not, and or operator we'll be using if any of these conditions are true. Okay, so accordingly you can define it at your own end depending on the requirement, right? So we are good with exclusive gateway. Now we will move to inclusive gateway. Now inclusive gateway and parallel gateway, these two types of gateway, we can define them as both diverging as well as converging gateway. Diverging, converging, these terms we read when we study physics in school, right? Diverging, converging. So diverging is a point from where, you know, all the output paths will go out. That's my diverging gateway. If you see the diagram of this one, this diagram, if you see, which we added or which we defined for this exclusive gateway, this is a diverging gateway. From here, all the output paths are going out. That's the reason I will call this as a diverging gateway. What is a converging gateway? It's just the opposite. When all these paths will meet at one point, that will be my diverging point. Here, this end event is actually the diverging point, not the diverging, sorry, the converging point, my mistake. This is the diverging point from where the output paths are going out. And this is the converging point where all the inputs are meeting over here. Okay. Now, if I go back to this inclusive gateway and parallel gateway, both inclusive gateways and parallel gateways can be implemented as a converging as well as a diverging gateway. Okay. Exclusive gateway cannot be implemented as a converging gateway. So that's the reason we did not see that implementation. But inclusive and parallel both can be implemented as the diverging as well as the converging gateways. Okay. So we'll now see how to implement inclusive gateway and we'll see both diverging as well as converging. Okay, so just to save our time, what I will do, I will duplicate this process. So how I can duplicate this? Next to this process, yesterday I said you have this arrow mark. Click on this. You have all these options. Different options are there. One of them is duplicate. Click on it. You see another process got created with the same name. I will rename this now. Inclusive gateway. Okay, so this is the same diagram that we had added. Now definitely I'm going to go and change this gateways. This is an exclusive gateway, so I'm going to change this into an inclusive gateway, right? So from where I can change it, so I have to click on this gateway, come to the general properties. On the right hand side I have the behavior. Here I have the drop down. So from here I can change this into an inclusive gateway. I'll change the name as well. And I'll add one more term over here, diverging inclusive gateway. Right? This is a diverging point. Correct. From here, I can see multiple output paths are going out from this gateway. That is the reason it's a diverging gateway. Now what I'll do, I'll add another inclusive gateway at this point, which will act as a converging inclusive gateway. I'm adding one more activity over here, just next to this converging inclusive gateway. And obviously this activity 5 also, you can see some dummy human service has been mapped. There's a dummy human service. Okay. So I'll also add this converging inclusive gateway so that you guys can understand whenever you refer this video. So converging, this is a converging gateway because all the inputs are meeting at one point over here. Now, like an exclusive gateway, guys, we can also add multiple conditions for an inclusive gateway. Okay. We saw how we added the conditions for an exclusive gateway. Similarly, over here also, we can add multiple conditions. So since I duplicated the process, that's the reason the conditions are also added over here automatically. Okay, so I can remove them also, and I can add new conditions. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll add some conditions over here now. So first condition for activity 3, it will be tw.local dot match found equal to true. And for activity 4, I will add tw.local dot data input equal to say success. So both the conditions are matching, guys. And what we have seen in exclusive gateway, it will still satisfy only the first condition. If it satisfies the first condition, then it will not move to the next conditions, right? So let's see how this inclusive gateway is different from an exclusive gateway. Let us trigger this process and see. So this process has been triggered, inclusive gateway. And I can see this instance ID 257 is created. activity 1 is triggered. Okay, and I can see this is active. I can claim this and I'll move forward. And now it will go to this gateway. And guys, you can see here, 2 activities have been triggered. So can I say that unlike an exclusive gateway, inclusive gateway can satisfy multiple conditions,
Yes, sir.
Yes, Rahul.
right? And if someone is asking me this question, how these conditions are being added in the code, it is simple if statement. There is no else statement over here, guys. If I have to write these conditions in a code, the code will be like this. If match found is equal to true, then go to activity 3. If data input is equal to success, go to activity 4. If none of this, then go to activity 2. So there is no else condition over here, which means whenever you don't have any else condition, it will go to all the ifs. It will try to find out whether the statements are satisfying or not. Okay, so inclusive gateway can satisfy multiple conditions. Okay, so we are good with this diverging inclusive gateway. If you have any questions, we can discuss right away, guys.
Rahul, is there a way we could include activity 2
Activity 2?
also? Yeah. Is
No,
there
that
a
can
way?
never happen. That can never happen.
Okay.
Okay, so this is all. There will always be a default flow, and this will only be satisfied if none of these conditions are satisfying.
Okay.
A gateway can never satisfy all the conditions. That can never happen.
Okay,
Okay.
Rahul. Okay, Rahul.
Okay. Okay. So this is how a diverging inclusive gateway works. Now we will see how a converging inclusive gateway works. Okay. So we have activity 4 and activity 3 triggered. So what I'll do, I'll now claim these activities one by one. I can see here both these activities are triggered. I can see on the inspector. So first, let me claim activity 4. It's a dummy coach once again. I'll move forward. Now just see this converging inclusive gateway. The token is waiting over here. Why it is waiting? Because it is actually waiting for the other token to reach over here. This converging gateway, this converging inclusive gateway is very, very smart. It knows which other tokens are active. If one token reaches at this point, it will wait for another active token to reach at this point, and then only it will move forward to activity 5. I'll repeat once again. This process where we can see from each of these activities, activity 4, activity 3, and activity 2, we have connected the sequence flows to this converging inclusive gateway. Now this converging inclusive gateway, what it is doing, whenever these 2 activities, out of all these 3 activities, only 2 activities were triggered, right? When I completed activity 4, the token came and it is waiting at this point, because this converging inclusive gateway is aware that there is one more activity which has been triggered and there is a token. Once this activity 3 is completed, the token will reach over here, and then only this converging inclusive gateway will release all the tokens, and then only it will move forward to activity 5. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll now claim activity 3. This is my activity 3. I will move forward, and now let's see what happens. Now my activity 5, which I had added after this converging inclusive gateway, it is now triggered. Right? We are good. So converging inclusive gateway, it waits for all the active tokens to come. Whenever it reaches at this point, then only it will move forward to activity 5 or the next activity or the next component, whichever it is. Okay, so if there was an end event instead of activity 5, then I could have said this process would have been completed only after this converging inclusive gateway received all the active tokens. Then it would have moved forward to the end event and it would have completed this process. Okay, any questions, guys? Very important, this inclusive gateway.
No,
Yes.
Rahul.
Okay. Okay. Now I use this term active token, right? I'm using few terms like active token, active path. Okay, let me just tell you what is an active path for this converging inclusive gateway. First of all, this active path, uh, and there is one more term called available path. Okay, there are two different terms, active path and available paths, and these two terms will always come with any converging gateway. And converging gateway we can define it using an inclusive gateway. We can also define it using a parallel gateway. So parallel gateway implementation, we are going to see it right now. But before we move to that type of gateway, I'll just explain these two terms, available path and active path. Now, if you consider, guys, this converging inclusive gateway, for this gateway, the available paths are all these paths which are connected to this gateway. These are all the available paths. And which are the active paths? Activity 4 to this gateway and activity 3 to this gateway. Why I'm considering this to be the active paths? Because in this process, after this gateway was triggered, only these two activities were triggered and not this activity, right? So if any token generates, the token will generate only for these two activities, which we saw just now, right? Only these two activities were triggered because this diverging inclusive gateway, it satisfied only two conditions, this one and this one, right? So only these two activities were triggered. And since we had tokens on top of these two activities, these two paths are considered as the active paths. And whatever inputs you add to this gateway, all the sequence flows are considered as the available path. Okay, so we are good with active path and available path. Everybody is nodding their head.
Yes, Rahul.
Rahul.
I believe we are good with
Yes,
whatever
Rahul.
we did till now.
Yes, Rahul.
Okay. All right. So now let's move to parallel gateway. There is a reason why I actually explained these two terms. You will understand. So I'll again duplicate this process. Okay. And once again, I'll rename this process as parallel gateway. So this is the parallel gateway which the process has been created. And now I'll go down and write like we did the last time. We will just change this type of gateways. So here you can see, guys, inclusive gateway is already selected because I duplicated it. So I'm going to change this into parallel gateway. Okay. And I'll change the name also. It is diverging inclusive gateway. So I'm going to change this into diverging parallel gateway. Similarly, for this converging inclusive gateway also, I'm going to change this into parallel gateway. And I'm going to change the name as well over here. Okay, so this is the process, parallel gateway. And here we have defined these two different gateways. One, after activity 1, we have defined a diverging parallel gateway. And this converging parallel gateway we have defined after these three activities, right? Now, guys, the good thing about this parallel gateway is we don't need to add any condition for a parallel gateway. parallel gateway doesn't support any condition. You cannot add any condition for a parallel gateway. So if we cannot add any condition for a parallel gateway, then how does a parallel gateway work? After activity 1 is triggered, after this is completed, when the token reaches at this point, this diverging parallel gateway, it just divides or it just splits the input into 3 output paths. Parallel gateway is just used to split the input into multiple output paths. If I have 5 output paths coming out of this diverging parallel gateway, all these paths will be activated. All paths will become active paths. Okay, so all the activities whichever are added after this diverging parallel gateway, if I connect all the sequence flows from the diverging parallel gateway to those activities, all those activities will be triggered. Okay, so if you see, if I click on this gateway, there is no implementation, there's no property called decision or implementation, right? So we cannot add any condition for a diverging parallel gateway. Similarly, a converging parallel gateway also doesn't support any condition. Anyways, a converging gateway doesn't support any condition. Last time when we are using the inclusive converging gateway, that time also there is no way we can add a condition. The reason is, from the inclusive gateway, we had only one output path coming out of that gateway. And when you have only one output path, anyways, you cannot add a condition, right? That's your default flow. And converging gateway is anyways where you get all the inputs, but you create only one output. That's the definition of converging gateway. So this is my parallel gateway. So let's run this. Let's trigger this process. It's very simple. I am going to trigger this process now. And we have a new instance created 258. And we have an activity over here 265, which is created. Activity 1 is triggered. I'll claim and I'll move forward. And now guys, you can see all the activities are triggered. All the activities are having tokens, right? And one by one, I need to complete this activity, and we will see how this converging parallel gateway, is it different than the converging inclusive gateway, or is it very similar to a converging inclusive gateway? Okay, we'll see this right now. So I'm going to complete each of this activity, and we will see whether this converging parallel gateway really waits for the other tokens to reach, and then only should it move forward to activity 5. Okay, let's see this. So I'll claim the activities one by one. So yes, I can see the converging parallel gateway also waits for the other tokens to reach, right? So I am going to claim each of these activities now. So you see the second token is also now waiting over here. So 2 tokens are waiting. It is waiting for the third token to reach. So I'm going to claim the activity 2 now. I click on done. And now I can see it has now moved to the next activity, that is activity 5. Okay. So can I say that like an inclusive gateway, or like a converging inclusive gateway, converging parallel gateway also waits for the other tokens to reach, and then only it will move forward to the next component? Can we say in this way?
Yes, Rahul.
Yes,
Everybody agrees to that?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, Rahul.
Yes, Rahul.
Yes, Rahul. Yes, Rahul.
Yes. So more or less, guys, it is correct, but there is still some difference. Okay. So we'll see that difference now. How exactly this converging parallel gateway is different than a converging inclusive gateway? It looks very similar. For this process, I can see it's very similar. Converging inclusive gateway was also waiting for the other tokens to come. This converging parallel gateway was also waiting for the other tokens to reach. So there is no difference we can see, but there is some difference. We'll see who is more smarter, converging parallel gateway or converging inclusive gateway. So to check the smartness of these gateways, what we will do, I'm going to change the implementation a bit. This diverging parallel gateway, I'm going to change this into an inclusive gateway. Why? Because I'm not going to trigger all these activities now. I'm just going to trigger only few activities. And then we will see whether this converging parallel gateway is waiting for the tokens from only activity 4 and activity 3, or it will also wait for the token for activity 2. Okay, so let's see. So first is I'm going to change this into diverging inclusive. And like we have already learned that we can add multiple conditions, right? For an inclusive gateway and also for an exclusive gateway. And an inclusive gateway, it can satisfy multiple conditions. So both these conditions will be true, right? We already know that. So activity 4 and activity 3 will be triggered. So let me trigger this process now. 259 is the new instance. Activity 1 is triggered. I will claim and move forward. So activity 3 and activity 2, activity 3 and activity 4 is triggered. Okay, let me just expand, collapse this a bit. Yeah, right. So now I'm going to complete these activities one by one. I can see activity 2 is not triggered, so I have to complete these 2 activities. So let me complete them. This is activity 4. Token now moves forward to the converging parallel gateway. And as we know, converging parallel gateway will wait for some token to come. So it is waiting for the token from activity 3 to reach. So let me complete activity 3. So it is still waiting for the other token to reach from activity 2. Now comes the definition: active path and available path. A converging parallel gateway waits for the tokens from all the available paths. Converging inclusive gateway, it waits for the tokens from only active path. So converging inclusive gateway is more smarter than converging parallel gateway. So this diagram, guys, this is a completely wrong definition, which I wanted to show you. So this indicates that if we don't implement gateways properly, especially converging gateways, you know what can happen. Your process will get stuck somewhere. It will not move forward. So this is a faulty diagram. Now I can never move forward to activity 5. The team who is waiting for the task for activity 5, they will wait for, I don't know for how long they will wait. We cannot move this token forward.
Deadlocked, yes.
Right? It's a kind of deadlock. So we need to be very careful when we are adding the gateways, even for diverging gateways also, and even for an exclusive gateway also. Okay, so we need to understand the requirement, and by understanding the requirement only we are going to define these gateways. Okay, any questions? Was I fast today, or it is fine?
No, Rahul, it's fine today.
Today
No,
it's fine,
Rahul.
Rahul.
No, no.
No, Rahul, it's fine today.
Clear.
Did we all understand?
Yes, Rahul.
Yes,
Yes,
Rahul.
Rahul.
Yes, Rahul.
Yes, Rahul.
Yes.
Okay. 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 So guys, are we good to discuss the use case today? Because we have some time. So I can explain the use case if you guys want, or if you have some doubts, we can discuss them first. Then we'll go to the use case.
We can start with the use case, Rahul.
Yes,
Rahul, use case.
Rahul, like what if we give that diverging parallel gateway and diverging, and they're converging this gateway?
Yeah, so converging inclusive gateway,
It'll work. Right?
it will still work. I mean, that's
Oh,
not a
yes,
quality diagram.
yes,
That's
yes, yes.
a proper diagram. So it will
Mhm.
work.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, if you have doubts, you can ask me. I am pausing my screen for a moment. I'll get the document. All right, guys, I'm sharing my screen once again. Okay. All right. Okay. So this is the use case. So I'll be sharing this use case anyways with Kirtana. So she would be sharing this with all of you. So like I said in the beginning of the session, this is the use case which you guys need to prepare and demo me on Monday. So if you have like 24 people, 23 people, we're going to divide this into 4 teams, and each team will be giving the demo for this application. Okay. So mobile application process. So this also has different layers of approval. Here also you will have some business object. So since this is your first use case, I am not writing any story. Usually the requirement analysis, whenever you will see, it usually comes in the form of a story. Okay, where you have the different participants. You need to understand by reading the definition and everything, that how many teams are there, what can be the business reference of the process. Okay, how many process do I need to create, how many user activities will be there. All these things you have to see and understand, and you will have an architect of the team and the designer, so they will decide on the design of the process. That's how it works everywhere. Now since this is your first use case, I have defined everything separately so that you guys can just read that out and do your design. Okay, so this is my mobile application process. I'll move forward. So here we have 3 different teams who are involved in this process. Okay, first team is the buyer team. Now here guys, you can understand this is a mobile application process, which means somebody is trying to purchase some mobile. Now if me and you, we go to a shop, we may be purchasing only one mobile. Yes, maybe if you somebody has some fantasy on mobiles, maybe they will purchase more than one, but usually we purchase only one mobile, right? Now this buyer, he's not a buyer like me and you. He has his own shop. Okay, so he always tries to purchase mobile phones in bulk. Okay, so he has his own shop, so he's purchasing the mobile phones in bulk, right? So there are different mobile brands. So maybe say iPhone, he wants to purchase say 10 mobiles at one go. Okay, so he has to fill up some application form, and after filling up that application form, whenever he submits that, it goes to the warehouse manager. The next level, warehouse manager can either approve or reject the purchase order of the buyer based on if you think that, okay, in the warehouse now, the buyer is trying to purchase, say, 10 iPhones, and 10 iPhone is not there with me, I am the warehouse manager, then I can reject it, right? If I feel that yes, the stocks are there, then I would approve it in that way. Okay, so approval and rejection will be based on the number of stocks you have. Now, obviously, we don't have a database. Now that is up to you, if you are a warehouse manager, whether you want to approve or reject it or not. Okay, now after the warehouse manager approves the flow, it goes to the seller. Okay, now seller can only approve the entire workflow. He doesn't have an option to reject. He can only approve it. Okay, so we have here three teams: buyer team, warehouse manager, and seller. I haven't discussed about the activities in details. We'll be discussing on that. So we have slides for that. We'll be discussing on that later. Now I move forward. Yes.
We
Yes.
don't have admin tools right in web version, so we cannot create users.
Yeah, so don't create users. You can create teams. Okay, you can
So,
create 3 different lanes.
okay.
If not teams, you can create 3 different lanes. You can even create teams. You can put in each of the team, you can put yourself.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you can do that. And
Okay.
if you don't want to create teams, that is also not an issue. You can simply add the lanes like buyer lane, warehouse manager lane, and then you have the seller lane. Okay, so teams we can deal with later. Anyways, we will have a session on teams. We didn't cover teams yet. Okay, we have a lot of things to cover, so I'm not giving any emphasis on teams for this use case. We'll have a separate use case for that. Personal loan is going to be the most complex process, so that will have all those things. Okay, so for the time being, just emphasize on what we have learned till now. Whatever we have learned till now, only on the basis of that, this use case is prepared. All right. So now we move to our business reference or business object. Mobile information is the name that everybody has to maintain the same name. What does this consist of? It consists of name of the buyer, address of the buyer, brand name. It's a drop down, so you can understand it's a list of name value pair. Then we have quantity, that's an integer. So how many mobile phones you want to purchase. Now, any of you, if you think that you want to add more in this business object, you can always add more. Okay, there is no issue. Definitely you have to add more. Selected brand name, right? We need to add it over here, which will capture the final value of the brand name from the drop down. If you want to divide the address of the buyer into, say, address line 1, address line 2, pin code, you can define. Okay, you can add more, you can enhance your UI. Okay, name of the buyer also you can define. You can divide it into first name and last name. Okay, all these things you can do. Now we move on to each of these activities. So listen to this very carefully, because this is the main thing, how each of these activities will work. We have defined it over here. First comes the buyer activity. So buyer fills up an application form and selects which brand of mobile he or she wants to purchase. He or she fills up the form and selects the mobile brand and number of mobile phones he or she wants to purchase. And then he or she submits the application form. Simple. So buyer is just like an application form which you have to define. There will be several coach views and all those text boxes and drop downs. Buyer needs to fill up all those details and he or she has to submit the application form. Okay. Now comes the warehouse activity. So from here, your tricks will be there. Okay, you have to understand them and you have to define it in that way. So first statement for the warehouse activity: if buyer tries to purchase more than 5 mobiles, only then the case gets routed to warehouse manager. So if the buyer is trying to purchase more than 5 mobiles, anything less than 5 or equal to 5 will be directly routed to the seller for approval. The second statement: if he is trying to purchase more than 5, so 6 or more, 7, 8 like this, then only the case will get routed to warehouse manager. Okay, so you have to think how to implement this. Moving forward, warehouse manager, if the warehouse manager finds that if there are enough mobiles in the warehouse, he processes the application and marks it as approved. In case he approves, the buyer gets a task again, which displays, congratulations, you would receive your product in 5 to 6 working days. Besides, seller also gets a task, which we know, right? That if the warehouse manager is approving, then we know that seller will get a task for approval, like we discussed earlier. So similarly, buyer will also get a task, okay, in parallel to the seller. And for the buyer, it will just display on the task, congratulations, you would receive your product in 5 to 6 working days. This will happen, guys, only when the warehouse manager approves it. And when the warehouse manager will approve it, whenever the purchase number of mobiles is more than 5, then only it will come to the warehouse manager. And if in case warehouse manager is approving the application, then a task will go to the seller for approval, and also another task will go to the buyer saying that congratulations, you would receive this product in these working days. Yeah. Now coming the rejection scenario. If the warehouse manager finds that there are not enough mobiles in the warehouse, he or she would reject the application, and the buyer gets a task which displays stock not available, please check back later. And for this scenario, there will be no task for the seller. Right? In rejection, we don't need any task for the seller. It will complete the process then and there. But yes, there will be a task will be created for the buyer, where the buyer will have this message that stock not available, please check back later. And this task, guys, that we are showing this message, congratulations, or stock not available, just below that message there will be a button. Okay, I'll mention this also in this use case, which is not mentioned. There will be a button called acknowledge. Whenever you click on that acknowledge, that activity will be completed, because we need to complete this new buyer activity, right, where we are displaying the message. So we would need some button over there. Only on the click of the button only the activity will be completed. So both the seller activities, buyer activities, which will display congratulations, you would receive a product, or stock not available, it will have an acknowledge button. Okay, I'll mention this in the use case. Now coming to the seller activity. Seller is the most simplest one. So seller will always approve the purchase. Seller finds the information submitted by the buyer in read-only mode, and he or she approve the purchase. Seller would get a parallel task with buyer only when warehouse manager marks the purchase of the buyer as approved. That we have seen, right? So whenever the warehouse manager approves it, then only the seller will get a task. Else he will not get a task. And about the display of data for the warehouse manager and the seller, both the cases, it will be in read-only mode. Warehouse will not be able to edit anything, whatever the buyer has added. Similarly, seller also will not be able to edit anything. Okay, so that's it. That's the use case. Very simple one. Any questions from anyone on the use case? I will share the use case with you guys. Once you get this use case, you can again come up with questions. Okay, so if you read it further, you might have more questions. But yes, one thing, I'm not going to help anyone for implementing it, because we have covered everything over here, whatever we have done. Okay, and guys, whatever layouts, whatever code views you're adding, we will do it in the same way. We'll create layouts. We are going to create our own code views, right? And in that layout, I'm going to add, basically, I'm going to create a template, which we did last time, right? Similar way, we have to implement it over here also. So buyer, seller, and the warehouse manager, the layout will be the same layout. Okay, using dynamic visibility, I'm going to display the layout. I'm going to hide few things. I'm going to show few things. Okay, so just think about all these complexities. And the good thing will be if Kirtana, so Kirtana is aware of everyone. If Kirtana can divide the team into say 4 groups, so if she can do this, that will be really helpful. So we can have a demo accordingly on Monday.
Rahul, I have one doubt. Like,
Yes.
that you had said the print when the congratulation, that's congratulation print, right? Should we provide the separate text for that?
Congratulations, this one,
The previous slide.
this
Yeah,
one,
this.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So there is a coach view.
Coach, yes.
There is a coach view called output text. You can use that.
Okay.
So we are good with the use case. No questions from anyone.
Rahul,
Yes.
so what does the word enough mobiles means in the warehouse activity?
I'm sorry, I didn't get you. Can you please be a bit louder?
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible. Yeah.
Yeah, you have given like enough mobiles, then how to implement that enough mobiles? What does that mean?
What mobile?
Enough mobiles.
Enough mobile. Okay. So there is, see, no, we don't have a database, right? We are not even tracking. Now, basically, you have to implement both the approval scenario and both the rejection scenario. Okay. So enough mobile is just a statement. Similar kind of statement you will see in the requirement and requirement documents also. Okay, so that is based on you. If you think that, if you're a warehouse manager, if you think that the stock is there, you will approve it. If the stock is not there, you will reject it. But you have to implement both the scenarios. Okay, approval and rejection.
Okay.